And also, one, my World War I had that too. World War I and War II.
Biological information from you. What was your date of birth?
When was what?
What was your birthday? What day were you born? In what year?
Oh, born in June the 2nd in 1920.
And where were you living when you were born, Bob?
Where was I what?
Where were you living?
Where was I living?
Yeah, when you were born.
Decatur.
Decatur, Ohio?
Decatur, Ohio.
And what were your mom and dad's names?
My mom.
Your mother and father?
Ethel and Thomas.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Oh, I had one brother and one sister.
And what were their names?
Oh, what was it, what?
What were their names?
Arthur and Alice. Very nice, both of them. We had a good time.
What did your dad do for a living?
He was a horse and cattle trader.
Let's see. And your mother, did she work out of the house?
No, she helped people, like when they had big big, like, you probably heard of the Kilburn company, Kilburn?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big, I guess they're still in business.
Yes.
My mother was up, when they had big dinners, they had $1,000, 1,000 acre, they had close to, I didn't live close to the farmland. I used to ride their horses and all that stuff. But they were very active, very wealthy people.
What church did you all belong to when you were a boy?
When I was born?
When you were a boy, yes.
When I was a boy, I was at Russellville, Ohio.
Was it a Baptist church or?
This is a regular place. Just a regular church, I guess.
Yeah.
Just UC or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So what schools did you go to as a boy, Robert?
Russellville, as a barber, Russellville, Ohio.
Mm-hmm. That was grade school?
That was a grade school, yeah.
And
then after that, it was Sardinia. Before I graduated, it was Sardinia.
Did you all move from Decatur to Sardinia?
I think real quick to say that, yeah, I guess that was about it.
What year did you graduate from high school?
1939.
1939. Did you play any sports while you were in high school?
Oh, yeah. Played baseball, and we didn't have a football. We just I guess that's the only thing it is.
Baseball?
Baseball, yeah. Baseball and softball, yeah. We were pretty good at that.
Did you have any girlfriends when you were in high school?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of work, did you have a job while you were going to school?
Oh, just farm work, I guess you might say. Hoeing corn. Hoeing corn, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Your father, is Decatur close to Sardinia?
Pretty close, yeah. I don't know, it's maybe 10 miles of running. It's very close.
I see. And you, was your dad still trading in horses when you lived in Sardinia?
Oh, yeah.
Were you,
Horses and cattle. He made pretty good money back in those times.
were you a good horseman as a boy?
Oh, yeah. My dad finally he bought me a pony. I had that for quite some time. A pony. And then farm horses, I used to ride them farm horses.
Work horses? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I used to do a lot of that.
Did you do any plowing?
Oh, sort of, yeah. Not plowing, I guess. When I was younger.
Did your dad do his own shoeing?
He did what?
Did he shoe his own horses?
I think he did, yeah. Certainly, I don't want to think about it. I never thought about that. Yeah. Well, he was really a horseman. Oh, boy. He really trimmed them. He trimmed the horses, boy. He could handle them. My horse was running away with me one time when I was on the farm, and he got a drink of water and took to the barn.
Yeah.
My dad jumped in front of it and stalled it. He was throwing it. The horse was rearing and bang, bang. He jumped right in the trail. And boy, he had a lot of guts.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What'd you do after high school? You graduated in June of 1939.
Yeah.
What'd you do in high school after you graduated from high school? Did you go to work anywhere? Or?
No, just farm work. That's about all I guess you might say.
Were your brother and sister older or younger than you?
No. I'd say one of them. My sister was in her, I don't know, I forget that. Mm-hmm. They were both quite a bit older than I was. My brother.
Okay. Well, when did you join? Where were you at when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor?
I was at Massachusetts.
What were you doing up there?
That was when I was in the Army. I was in the Army.
When did you join the Army?
I guess the last time I joined the Army was in this time. I joined the Army on my.
How old were you when you joined the Army?
Well, that's when I got out of school and everything, I guess. When I really joined the Army,
Well, I'm looking at your Army discharge right here.
Oh.
And it says that you joined on 12 February 1941.
That's probably when I joined. But I joined later than that, since I was older now. I joined the Army again. No, it's not too long ago.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go to basic training at after you joined the Army in 1941?
When I joined the Army in 1941, I joined the Army as 1949.
And where did you go for basic training?
I probably UC High School. The UC, University of Cincinnati. I went to night college there.
Oh, okay. Was that before you went in the Army, or after?
Well, you mean the last time I was in the Army? Not too long ago. I did it a long time ago. Then I didn't for a long time. But I just did my.
I'm gonna read this thing it says about your service. It says that you were a medium tank crewman, served with the 70th Tank Battalion as a tank crewman and platoon sergeant in the European Theater of Operations.
Yeah.
performed the duties of various crew positions, including radio man, driver, gunner, and tank commander.
Yeah.
Maintained contact with the other tanks in the platoon using voice radio sending and receiving equipment.
Yeah.
Inspected radio sets periodically. Drove the tank according to the directions of the tank commander.
Yeah.
Prepared ammunition for use in the 37 millimeter or 75 millimeter gun mounted on the tank.
Yeah.
Aimed gun for direct and indirect firing by estimating range and setting it on the gun.
Yeah.
And it also goes on to say, as platoon sergeant, you coordinated the tactical operations of the 5 tanks in the platoon.
Right.
Transmitted order from platoon leader and directed their completion.
Yeah. That's when I was king, taking care of the 5 men.
Right. And it says here you were wounded in Paris, France, in August of 1944.
Yeah, I got part of that in the store. I mean, I went. I was in the army, of course, and I went through. What's the name of that big city in the old port city? And they told me to go. And I was needed for, and that's when this is village. What's that big village in
Paris?
Yeah.
Yeah, Paris.
That's when I went out and I had a call. You were out. You wanted. I got on the basic side of the. It was in right at the end of the city, you might say, and boom, you have it. It hit me in the side, and all 4 of us, or 5, got out. One guy that I never knew whatever happened, whether he passed away or not. There's 2 guys come out and picked me up after I jumped out of the tank, and I dumped me out, and I had to crawl on my stomach. And 2 guys from the medic come out, and one of them grabbed each hand and ran with me because they were still shooting at me. That's how that happened. And then I went from there into hospital. Come back to Cincinnati, of course.
Yeah.
It wasn't in Cincinnati. It was in the state of Ohio.
Right.
It was eastern part. Winchester area, you might say.
Yeah. Can you tell us about the invasion at North Africa? That was called Operation Torch, and that was November of 42.
Yeah, well, when did I go there for the first time? Oh,
I think it was November of 42 for the
yeah, that would be that makes sense. Yeah, I kind of lost track on some of that, but on my it was shot when I was shot.
No, this is before you were shot. This is
before I was shot?
Yeah, this is in Africa.
In
Morocco.
Morocco. That's when I went over there, and that's one of my trips over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Africa, and let's see, it's right on this thing here. I give you an idea. They had a big thing. I need a big thing out of this.
Yeah.
That.
This,
that's when I got
this particular map diagram shows you being in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and over to Libya also.
They had a big my tank had a big Sicily.
You were driving a Sherman tank, or did you guys have the Stuart tank also?
No, I just had the one tank.
The
I had
Sherman?
an old, it was big. There's a new tank was much bigger.
The Sherman tank?
Sherman, I guess it was, yeah. Yeah, I had that for quite a while. I went over that part of went over that part of North Africa, you might say,
Right.
and different things. And I was over there when they were saying that a lot of 70 people are going to lose their lives in this war. And I was in the area there, and I went to one where they were loading up all people that died, I guess you might say. And they just had them in, back behind a truck, you might say. They were picking them up, and at one time, well, I didn't say that, but there was a big field, and I got hurried because it was all around me. It was far, and they walked. I looked out, and it was in my tank, and there was a guy there laying down, and I couldn't tell whether he was dead or not, but he had a picture of his wife, I guess, or he was looking at it. I mean, he was laying sort of. I thought it was kind of a little. He might have been hiding, but that's where they had the big gunshots and all in that area. And it was after that. That's when I got out of there, and in that evening I went over and what's the name of that city? The tail end of France near West. What the heck is the name of that? It's a very popular place. I watch people walk to well, the evening, I say.
When you were in North Africa, were you fighting against Rommel?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got school back for that. Real Germany.
Rommel was the head of their tank crew. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Anything else you remember about Northern Africa? Did you get into Casablanca or any of those cities?
Casablanca, yeah. In Southern Africa, what was the name of that? The South Africa. The big city. What the heck is the name of it? Casablanca?
Yeah,
Casablanca. Yeah. I was on my first time. I went through that, and it was kind of calm then. I was out when they what was those people? They took stuff to a guy come. He was a leader. He was yeah, that's right. They brought food to him. I saw all that. That happened. They weren't shooting. The war was going on then, but they enjoying the city. I spent some time in Africa there.
Were you at Kasserine Pass?
Oh, what? That sounds familiar, yeah.
Kasserine Pass?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. And I was in Africa for long. I know I was there one time. I mean, this is years ago. I was just telling Chuck about this. But I saw our president at that time, was his name Roosevelt?
Right.
Roosevelt. And yeah, I didn't get Churchill. I didn't, but I got the president.
Roosevelt.
President. The bed. He went 3 times. President did, and he had us all, and that was open. They had the soldiers was on the hilltop, hated because President Trigger, what was his name? President, yeah, he was going, and I always wanted that, but we had the tanks that were lined up, and he went through the tank, and he went through. They snapped a picture, and I was sitting there, but I couldn't. I tried to get that, but I couldn't get it.
How long were you in Africa?
Oh, you mean when I was over there fighting?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How long was I in Africa? I think I spent a couple of nights there, I guess you might say.
Well, you were there longer than that. You had to be
Oh,
there.
well, yeah.
You had to be there a couple of months.
Well, that was daytime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, any of your men get wounded in Africa? On your tank?
Oh, yeah, there was one when I landed in Africa. That was on the beach. Beach?
Right.
And when I was on the beach, even the boats had a big depth over our head. They were shooting over our heads, and two guys come out, and they were on the back part of. That's what we were shooting at. And the two guys on the back side of the tank, and I guess they got shot, and they passed me as I was going out. Of course, I didn't stay out there very long, but that was one thing. And next day I started up north, and I got when I first was up north. I mean, I'm still good, and I started up north. And the first thing we come to was an orange orchard, and on that orange orchard, the guys come out, and they were big. I mean, 10 or 12, and they surrendered. You know what I mean? So we started then. From there on, they walked behind us. And there was a tank about that, but people we were following into the river parts come up there. But that was quite a. I don't know, they were like maybe 12, 15 years. There was a whole bunch of them, and they all come out. And we were kidding my leader at that time. He had a pistol. He had the thing in his hand. He's very used to it. But they came to him about. But he didn't shoot anybody. But we were over to the river life, and that's I don't know what the name of that river was. They had a hangar for a while. Hangar. And we stayed there all night. And the guy come on a motorcycle that night, and they shot him. That was one of our guys. So I don't remember that.
Do you remember the invasion at Sicily?
Oh yeah. I was a part of that. Yeah. When I went, I went from land. I was American, North American, and I crossed the river like, and I lost a river and got into Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got into Sicily, we captured quite a few people there. And that's when it all started. We had a big tank fighter,
A
lot of them.
battle.
Yeah. I had a friend I knew real well, and he was a top sergeant, and he had the highest in all of it. Medals. He had all the highest medals, and I mean, he was a wonderful person. He was a sergeant, and
what was his name?
Boy, I wish I could figure out his name.
Do you remember?
He went to one time. He went up with the dinner, going on and everything. He, he had more medals, you might say, than anybody that time. Way up there. And he'd go for one tank and he'd get down and he'd go for another one. And he did that. He was a wonderful person. But he was hot. He was really a fighter. Right.
Yeah. Do you remember the names of anybody that was part of your crew?
Part of my crew.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to think about that. But part of my crew. Yeah. Well, I remember them. I remember this time. They were. That's for some of my flying is now. I forget things.
Right.
I get things.
Well, you're doing good, bro. Don't worry.
Well, that's what my son told me. He said, "Quit worrying."
Quit worrying. That's
But
right. Do you remember the Normandy invasion?
oh yeah.
Did you come ashore in what they called a duck, like in the water?
Oh yeah. We had all our tanks were plated up, you might say. We were underwater, and right up on the shore.
Yeah.
And I did that twice. And the first time I did it was an old trunk. Tank, older tank. And he had our first time there, he had some kind of a thing. So they were shooting, probably had like basketball stuff all over a mountain. But they didn't hit any of us, I was thinking. But we had one tank we thought might have went under, we didn't know. But we went under the water, actually. We come up out of the water, and we had to get this thing off. This was the first time. It's bad. We had to get this stuff off of the back of the tanker, or we catch fire or something. We had to go around the tank and tow it off. And
what was different about the second time?
The second time was a tank that was, of course, real fancy tank. That's one I used the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a nice tank. And that's the one that got hit.
Yeah. So you landed on Utah Beach with the 4th Division?
4th Division, I remember that for the 4th Division, yeah. But,
did you have any gun battles with the Germans there with your tank?
They were kind of away from me, and I had to bring in a friend. He was across the river, not across the ranch from me, but we had a wonderful time. And he got hit in the back of his head or something. But we got together one time up at what was the name of that city?
Paris?
Yeah, it was Paris. Well, it was a big city, a big popular city. Mm-hmm. And this friend of mine, he was the one that was fighting the Germans, and he tried to tell me, "Why don't you go get out of this?" And he finally, that night he went to me. We slept in a tent, and they were still shooting. Don't bother them, And once in a while, airplanes go over, and they were pretty tough. He tried to get me to come home, And he finally did get me home. And he was quite a while after. He was a very handsome man and a very good person.
What was his name? You remember his name?
I I sure was living long enough.
Well, they come to you.
Yeah.
This sergeant you were talking about before that had all the medals.
Yeah.
Do you remember his name?
No, I can't think of it. But I could look those up. Yeah. But he was very popular. Yeah, and just absolutely just a wonderful person. And he jumped around from one tank to another. He was a fighter. He went to, I was going to tell you this, well, we had a party over there, and he was going to come to the party, you know, and the press was going to come. Because we had all the wins, and he didn't show up. He didn't brag about it. He was just a wonderful guy. But, and very good. Soldier, you might say.
When you were over there in North Africa and Sicily
Yeah.
and France, did you pick up any souvenirs from the war or anything and bring it home?
You know, I don't think I think I really did. Yeah.
Did you carry a .45 rifle? I mean, handgun with you?
Yeah, it was a pistol. Pistol, yeah. Yeah, someone I got a picture of it. Yeah. Yeah. When I come out there, when we went to Sicily, when we got to Sicily, we walked over there, kind of a, these guys walked out, and of course they kind of surrendered themselves, you know. Just as soon as we got across they come up, so I don't know about maybe 3 or 4 of them, I guess. They give up. I went one time in Sicily, actually, when the war was going on, this lady invited us over for dinner. And we had dinner. But I'll tell you that, I'd like to go back to that country. They got all kind of fruit. Boy, really good. On the tree, I mean, you know.
Yeah. Well, each time you went from one battle to the next one, you were traveling on a Navy ship, weren't you?
Navy ship?
Yeah.
Oh, well, no, the only one I went on was this big, what do they call them? Anyhow, it was able, when I got over last time, it was firing over our heads. Off the ship. And that's what I was telling you. These 2 guys come out and they were riding the back of the tank and they looked like their toes were bloody. So they were got hit. And they were deeper in the tank and this ship was shooting bombs over our heads.
Were you in England?
Oh, yeah, I was in England. We went there from, we were there for quite a while. I got these pictures here. That's just, when the heck we do there? Yeah, that's good.
Where'd you go to basic training at,
Basic training?
Yeah.
Back there. That's one of these is mine. I don't know which one it is.
Where at, back here? Fort Knox? You had to go to regular basic training and then tank training.
Yeah, that was when I was in the, over in off Atlantic Ocean there. So I can't think of the name of it. Yeah, I went through a training in North Carolina area or something like that. I got a picture here, I think, where I had a chair. One, right here. This he's here someplace. There he is. I got a cast on you, I think.
Yeah, you got crutches and a cast.
That was back in the airplane near the landing station.
Yeah, and you're in England here?
England, I think.
And so you got hit in the right leg and hip?
I got left leg.
Or left?
Yeah. Yeah, I had to, well, I was just going to start saying, I had to, so they were still shooting at us, and I got on the belly and chest and crawled about 50 yards probably, so, and the two big guys come out, and one at one end, one at the other, and they ran with me, because they were still shooting at us. Because all roads was that big city over there. Paris, yeah.
So you got discharged in 1946. You come home right away?
I guess I did, yeah.
Where'd you come to? What city? Did you come back to Sardinia or what?
No, I was
what kind of work? Where did you go to work when you got out of the service? Or did you go back to school?
No, that's what I'm trying to figure out. I went back. UC is a lot of way. In my UC, that's when I was older. UC.
That was after you got out of the service?
Yeah, I guess it was after I got out of the service.
How long did you go to UC? 1 year, 2 years?
No, I went night college.
Oh, yeah.
I think I went 7 years. After I worked, when I went, after I worked, my father-in-law, I married his daughter, and I got out of I went to night college.
For 7 years.
That's when I lived up my Sardinia or my up there.
Would you drive down every night?
Yeah, we rode down and we changed around back and forth. Yeah, I think we had to be there at 6 o'clock or 6:30 or something. I think I did that for 7 years. I think.
Did you get a degree in what?
Yeah, I got a degree of decorator. I was a decorator at one time.
You said you got married.
I got married, yeah.
When did you get married? Do you recall?
I'm trying to think.
What was your wife's name?
Oh.
Right. What's it done?
She was a beautiful lady. I showed her a picture if I can find it.
Where'd you meet her at?
I'll meet her there in, I guess it would be, Mary was in Marymount area, I guess it was. That's where I had my store back in Marymount. And I got a picture here or something to think about it, and that big thing. And I'll show you my, yeah, I was thinking about it, yeah.
Yeah, I'll look
It's
for it.
underneath. It's a big thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that, I got a picture of that.
What was her name, Bob?
Oh, I can't think of it.
You remember when you got married?
Oh, yeah. I got that.
Where did you get married at?
Went down at,
Around Sardinia or?
no, just small. Silverton before I got in.
Did you wife here?
Huh. Let me see. Oh, he didn't run.
Was her dad's
Yeah, I think that's her.
was her dad's name Ray Brown?
Her dad's name was Julius. He was very, they were pretty wealthy people. And he had one of those things you go into a club, and I can't think of the name of it. Very, very serious and very, it's a thing you go into. You had to go into it and know it. They had a one. His wife and me, they were like parents. Very nice. We got along very good. I got married with my, I got married. He gave me his, he gave it to me. When we got married, he would take his car and go down to Smoky Mountain. I see. His wife, of course, he and his wife both had cars.
Just 1 second. How many children did you and your wife have, Bob?
One
boy and 1 girl?
And that was the guy who first called me last night, and we had a talk. But he called me, and I told him we lived in Normandy, you know. Mm-hmm. And he went to school in Normandy school. He graduated from there, and I don't think we ever had any. My wife was take good care of him, what I did too. But I don't think we ever had any good time. We went up to Canada and took a canoe for 40 weeks, about 40 acres, big canoe, and up into Canada. And I got a picture of it. I'll show you before you leave. There's a big picture of it. The guys he had on there with him. He was real sharp. Guy. He just had it. I don't think we ever had any words.
Mm-hmm. What about your daughter? What's her name?
My daughter? Mm-hmm. No, we just had the one son, that's all.
And that's Tom?
Tom, yeah. And he's wonderful, good looking, about 6 footer. He was just absolutely wonderful. Just like he kept telling me, he was coming out. He kept saying, don't think he's a warrior, and tell me, he talked to me, and he good looking, 6 footer, I guess you might say, but
after you were a good, handsome young man.
Yeah. Well, he lives in Indiana.
Yeah.
And that's where we don't. It's almost 2 miles out there. What's the name of that city? Indiana.
Harrison.
I can't think of it. It's a very simple name. It's a big name out there. Where they have the horse races and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I can't think.
And tell me about your business that you had. What was the name of your business in Marine?
My Pens Paint and Wallpaper Center. That Pen comes from the name. That's what my wife's name was. Her last name was Payne.
Payne?
Payne. P-E-N-N. Yeah.
P-E-N-N?
P-E-N-N. Oh, the first name. My goodness. I knew I got a picture here.
How much do you do in a minute? you do there at your business?
When I did what?
What you do at your business? What you sell? What you do?
I sold. I was for paint, wall paint. Paint. I was one of those, well, whatever you want to call them, painter. I had paint and sold wallpaper and I made picture frames. I was over here.
Yeah. Did you make all your own picture frames there?
Oh yeah, I did most of that, and I had a guy that worked with me. He did it. So we had a pretty good business going for a while. But well, I think it was 24 years or something. It was pretty long. And I got had a guy got me to get in on selling, what the heck you call them, salesman. I was with him for quite a while. No. It was a popular business.
So Bob, what we'll do is we'll take some of your pictures and make sure that they're included in the interview. And you're the first fellow and the first veteran that we ever had the privilege of interviewing who had all three of those invasions. The invasion in North Africa in November of 42.
Yeah, there's the time stretch they get me. But I did. It took me to work there. I didn't realize I was doing the same thing twice,
Three times.
Really. The only thing I didn't visit again was way in Africa. Down in I didn't get down there the second time. It just wasn't that much trip. I was there when the guy that they got names that they come in and give them things to eat and all that kind of stuff.
Well, you were also at the invasion of Sicily.
Yeah.
July the 10th, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Operation Husky of 43.
Yeah.
And then, if that wasn't enough service to your country, you served again the Normandy invasion on June 6th of 1944.
Yeah.
Your country, and everybody, myself included, I'm just so proud of your service to our country. Speak so highly of you, and I want to thank you for the time you set aside for this interview so that we can.
Well, last time it was something. We went through San Francisco yesterday. San Francisco. We went through there and the people were bringing up wine to us, and there's still guys up in the houses with shooting at us. And
It's a town in
Sicily. I went to my what do you call it? But he said, they're waiting for you to go out there, and that was when I went out there, and it was a suburb, and I was ordered to go out there. If I thought it was going time, I could forget. But that's how I got. I in the morning got back on the out there, and bang, it didn't have it. Hit me the side of the tank, and the tank. The guy was smart enough to keep the thing. He let the thing run, so he let it run out. But I had to get out. All that was so bad. one guy, I even asked him, he was on the other side of the tank. I said, how is it? And he said, he's gone. So that's all I knew about how that the other guy got all right. And, there's a guy, when I got hit, when I got out of the tank, there's a guy who was running, and I don't know whether he was running or whether he was carrying carrying a rifle and running away from me, of course. And, they told me they kept me just out in France, of course. They kept me, and we went out the next day, and I got England, I guess you would say. England went to I know that was the United States. I went into a hospital, and I guess I was pretty bad shape. So the nurse told me after, he said, we didn't think you was going to make it. And the guy that maybe the bone, well, not in here, bone graft, yeah. He said they're going to have to, very long. That's what they told me. We thought you were even going to make it. So I went, there were 3 hospitals down there. But this guy, they did the operation on him. He was a German. He was a German, what do you call him? Of course, he lived in the United States. He was a German operator. And he did a good surgeon, yeah. He did a good job on it. And he said they're pretty hard to make your bones with the talent, yeah. That's what they have to do is put rolling back on the green other one, yeah. And but I got out so I could walk with a walker. And of course, if you want to, they wouldn't be, of course, to say a handicap. If the guys going, that's where they get off and go on the what do you call it? Going after all there. You know,
Are you talking about a pension or something?
yeah, you got it. You go off for you know, you go off for lifetime, you might say. You're what do you call it? I can't.
Disabled.
No, well, I was disabled. Handicap, yeah. But that's when I started using helpers, you might say.
Buddy, with all respect I can muster, I want to thank you for this interview. And Veteran of the 70th Tank Battalion, World War II. Thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Sergeant Robert
Come
Duncan.
Hello, my name is Ray Hughes, and I'm the interviewer for the Veterans History Project, conducted out of the Cincinnati Hamilton County Public Library, located in Cincinnati, Ohio, at 9th and Vine Streets. And today's date is March the 29th, 2021. This is an addendum to the interview that we did with Robert T. Parker, a World War II veteran who at 100 years of age has memory issues, as you can tell from the disc that adjoins this one. And we felt that we should do an addendum to that interview to pay a proper tribute and respect to Sergeant Parker for the service that he rendered to our country. And that's the purpose of this addendum to that interview. With me this day, I have his son, R. Thomas Parker, who lives in Indiana, and we're doing this recording via Zoom. All right, just to call you Tom, Mr. Parker.
Yes, please.
Yes. But Tom, if you would, tell us about your early childhood with Sergeant Parker.
Well, of course, the story starts, I heard stories since I was young and enjoyed all of them. But my understanding, the story starts, my father, believe it or not, was sitting around a potbelly stove right after the Pearl Harbor. He lived in the country, Sardinia, Ohio, way down almost to the Appalachian area, and he was sitting with his best friend Jimmy Vance around this potbelly stove, which was one of the gathering places in their town. And Jimmy Vance said to him, "Well, Bob, we really should volunteer." It was, I think, may have been January, even just right after Pearl Harbor in '41, or in '42, and he said, "Bob, we really ought to volunteer before we're drafted, because then we can choose the theater that we want to serve in." And he said, "Bob, one thing about the Army is that they have chicken dinner every Sunday." And I remember that as a kid. I got such a charge out of that. So he and Jimmy Vance joined up, and they decided to go into the tank battalion, and they received their training. I think they received their training in New Jersey. And I'm not sure whether that was Fort Dix or whatever, but he started his training and with his buddy Jimmy Vance. And one of the earliest memories of his training was that they were in the Shermans training, and at the fort, wherever his tank went into a ditch, and it knocked all his teeth loose, and he had to have all his teeth wired so that they would remain, so he could continue to keep his teeth. And he said it was an incredible process, but he knocked them all out because his mouth hit the rim of the tank. He was in the head, the commander of the tank at the top, and it hit that rim and it really knocked his teeth loose. They were able to save them. So that was one of the early stories that I recall. He told me when I was a child, and has told me many times throughout the years. But he first served in Operation Torch in North Africa under Patton. And what he remembers there was that they were under a lot of fire as they were reaching that beach. But once they got in, the Vichy French, I guess it was, once they secured, they didn't have a lot of resistance, but once they secured in North Africa, I understanding they were in Morocco. And of course, General George Patton was a wonderful diplomat and took good care of the troops. But a couple things I remember him telling me about Morocco is they had handbooks for all the soldiers to try to get them culturally up to speed with the Muslims and their habits, and to be very cautious about how they interacted, particularly with women and alcohol. And they wanted them to make sure they understood that. And they gave each of them a handbook to help them get culturally aligned with the people of Morocco. But one of the other wonderful things, a couple other things he reminded me of Morocco was one of the visions he saw that he remembered the most was the red Moroccan horse riders going across the desert. He remembered that vividly. He also remembered the Atlas Mountains, crossing the Atlas Mountains. So those are the things I remember in North Africa. And I'm not sure how far he got. I don't think he got into battle with Rommel, but they were taken from North Africa. And of course, that was the first, I think that was the first major operation of the United States in the war as far as invading a foreign country was Operation. He was part of that. And he was in the 70th Tank Battalion, and they were, my understanding, they were attached to General George Patton. So those are the things I remember about Morocco. Then my understanding from Morocco, I don't know how far east they went, but I don't think he was in a tank battle with Rommel, Erwin Rommel. But anyway, he ended up, I think from there, they went to Sicily with Operation Husky. And Operation Husky, he had some wonderful memories about Operation Husky. Operation Husky, he remembers in Sicily, the people were wonderful, he said. He said he can remember many times. He's got a couple wonderful pictures posing in front of an olive tree with or without other buddies of his that were fighting together. But one of the things he remembers was the people were very kind and welcomed them. And one of the things I remember him telling me is they'd go to eat somewhere at a restaurant and the people would pour out spaghetti on a feeding trough and they could eat as much as they want. He remembered that. Also, they filled up their 5-gallon water jugs with wine, the local wine. And some of the people, I guess, probably, drank wine because of the water was questionable. So anyway, those were a couple things I remember about Sicily. He had this marvelous picture with one of his buddies that it was in the 70th Tank Battalion. I think he may still have that, but I know he has a wonderful picture by himself, solo, standing under an olive tree. And we'll try to get you a copy of that, but I don't know. Next time I'm going to see him on his birthday on June 2nd. So I'm going to ask him about that picture. Maybe we can take a cell phone at least of it and send it to you digitally. So anyway, that's what I remember about Sicily. North Africa, then Sicily. I don't think he was part of the campaign in Italy. I don't think he was part of that. But
who was he attached to on Sicily?
Well, see, I think he was attached to Patton. I think he was involved in Patton's race against Montgomery to get to Palermo.
Mm-hmm.
And I do, before I forget, there's a wonderful story I just remembered that he told me about. They were in Sicily. Their tanks were in a column on a winding mountain road, and he said he was in charge of his column, and suddenly he realized that the Germans had zeroed in on their artillery, and he felt he got an order from his commanding officer saying, "We've got to turn around and get out of here because our tanks are going to get hit. They're zeroing in and targeting us." So he apparently, the whole column turned around and went backwards at full speed to get out of there. Well, the commanding officer of his commanding officer said, "Sergeant Parker, where is your column going?" And he said, "Talk to the captain. He's right behind me." And he ordered us because the Germans have zeroed in on us. I remember that story. That was a good story. And he said they had a lot of, in the mountains of Sicily, for some reason, they did a lot of training. And they would climb with backpacks for training. But other than that, that's really the stories I remember from Sicily. But he really enjoyed Sicily. He thought the people were wonderful. Then, as far as I can tell, the next move was they took them back to They took them to England to train for the invasion, Normandy. And here's where most of the stories come from. Some of the things he remembers about training. He was head of his platoon, and there's a wonderful picture somewhere, hopefully at his home, where he's standing with his platoon. I think 10, 15 men, his tank platoon, and they were training. And he said that one of the things that was interesting, he said that's the heaviest he ever was in his whole life. He was 175 pounds. He never got any heavier than that. He said he was in really good shape. Well, one of the most momentous occasions of his training in England was they got them all together and told them that they were going to go out to this hillside, that there was going to be a speech. So they thought, well, okay, we're trying to, we'll follow our orders and go out there. They had no idea who was going to speak. They went out to a hillside and all sat on a hillside. General George Patton gave one of his 7, he only gave 7 of these addresses, my understanding, in England to the invading troops. And my father said they were all surprised. But the one takeaway from George Patton's speech was that he said he had never seen morale affected. So he said, in his own words, General Patton got us all so wound up. We were ready to go over and invade Normandy tomorrow, because he had that kind of, everybody knows, he had that kind of effect as a speaker. He said the morale was incredible after the Patton speech, but he did that historic thing, one of 7. He only gave 7 of those. And my dad was sitting on a hillside waiting for Patton to speak. And I thought that was a marvelous story that he got to be part of that. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of between that and when they actually went to Normandy. The only thing I can remember is that he may have also heard Eisenhower speak to the 101st Airborne, and tell them that there's going to be casualties as much as 10% or 10,000 or something like that, and he wanted to make sure that Eisenhower wanted to make sure that the troops in England that were training were prepared for that. But as far as going across the channel, my dad remembers he was in the landing craft, the LT,
LST.
with a group, the LST, that would be it. He was in the LST, and he remembers a lot of training they did with the amphibious tanks in England. So he was in one of the amphibious tanks, and I didn't realize this till about 7, 8 years ago. I was at his place, and he said, Cecil Nash was in the 70th Tank Battalion, Tom. He sent me a book. I said, no, I got to see it right away. Cecil Nash prepared a book, and that book explained the outlay of the invasion of Utah Beach. And apparently, he was in the first row of Utah Beach, his company, his tank company. And he said there were 36 of us that went over in the LSTs. And he said one of them hit a mine, and they lost all 4 of those tanks. But everybody else got on the beach. And he said, he's told me this so many times, he said, all we can do was run around and not try to get hit. Not to get hit. He said the fire was heavy. But he said the most memorable thing he remembers about Utah Beach was they weren't sure they were going in or not. So Teddy Roosevelt Jr., the president's son, General Roosevelt, he vividly remembers him walking on the beach, trying to decide where they were going to start. And he heard shortly after that Teddy Roosevelt, General Roosevelt Jr. said, with his cane, he's walked with a cane. He was crippled in World War I. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. said, we're going to start the war right here. And he was the first general on the beach. the invasion, the U.S. Army invasion. He was the first general. We're going to start right here. And he heard that General Bradley was worried about General Roosevelt and was afraid he was going to get hit with a sniper. But he survived, and he lived just a couple months after in the Utah Beach invasion and died of a heart attack before 60. It was very tragic, but he made his mark, and they gave him a posthumous Medal of Honor. I don't remember when, but my dad vividly remembers General Roosevelt. He remembers in the tank running up and down the beach trying not to get hit. And he said, that's all we could do until the engineers had breached the wall that was there. But he said, once we got through that wall, he was basically on the front. He was at the front of the column, and he said he can vividly remember the paratroopers with black faces in the trenches, waiting for them to move forward. And this is probably one of the greatest stories he ever told me. So here he is, 70 Tank Battalion, of course, is the right flank of the whole invasion force. And they put all the experienced troops there. So he said, we're sitting in a tank and we didn't have any orders. And he's right at the front of it. And they have no idea what they're going to run into as far as resistance. They got the paratroopers there. Most of them made it. They're in their blackened faces waiting. And he said, I could still remember standing up in the tank, and we hear a Jeep noise behind us. We have no idea. We have no orders. We don't know where we're going. And up comes a colonel in a Jeep, and didn't have a cover, anything. And my father said he asked him, Sergeant, why is your whole column and everybody stopped at this point? I recall, I think he said, we did not have orders, sir. This colonel with just a driver and no protection, he said he gets in front of us and waves his arm. Just said, I'm sorry, I'm getting choked up. We're going in. And he led him down the road and just, I don't know. Excuse me for a minute.
That's all right.
So anyway, the colonel in the Jeep led him down the road. And once they got a Karatan, apparently it was very, very difficult counterattack. And one of the men in his company was decapitated by artillery fire that they ran into. Well, they finally got to St. Mary Glees, and they liberated St. Mary Glees. And what he remembers about the hedgerows, a couple interesting stories there. He remembers, again, as you guys know, the Germans have very powerful tanks, the Tigers, and particularly the Tigers. He said they were very, very difficult to hit. All we could do, we outnumbered them, and we were fast, and all we could do is just run around and not get hit. But apparently the Tiger armor was the weakest at the bottom and the back. So that's the only place they could get him. He said otherwise our shells just bounced off of him. But he has one interesting story in a hedgerow that I remember. He said, we were camped out at night, and I was lookout, and I was in the hedgerow country, and everybody was asleep but me. So he said, I had my sidearm with me, and I heard a noise behind a hedgerow. And I pulled my gun out, and I started walking toward the noise. And I walked, and I really was worried that what would happen on the other side of the hedgerows, I'd just get shot or attacked by because every step I would make, the other would make a step. Well, he got the bottom of the hedgerow, and it was a dog. And I thought that was an interesting story. So
Yeah.
It was a dog. But anyway, as far as the hedgerow, there really wasn't much between uh, the hedgerow country until they got to the liberation of Paris. But he said he can still remember the Parisians, how grateful they were there. And he said they would, as their tanks, he drove under the Arc de Triomphe. He said he remembers in the parade that the French on the side of the road were holding bottles of champagne and wine and everything. He said they'd run out, but as soon as they heard some German shooting or snipers, they'd run back, and they back and forth, and this through the whole uh, the Parisian, got on the other side of Paris, and of course he got himself in a situation. This was September of '44. That was the end of his active service because
September what?
it was in September of '44. I don't remember the date, but
Mhm.
what had happened is they had pushed and pushed and pushed, and they didn't have reconnaissance, and it was in the evening, and make sure I get the story right. So they're all around the campfire with their captain trying to decide what to do. It's almost dusk, and the captain, I think Dad was in with 5 tanks, and he said, "I want you to move." The captain goes, "I want you to move out in B formation, and I want you to do some reconnaissance." And Dad actually, though he did follow the order, he said to the captain, he said, "Captain, this is really a bad idea. We don't know what the Germans have, in front of us, whether it's artillery, anti-tank guns. We could be walking into an ambush." He told him that, but he went ahead with his order. So he was in the front tank, and they went out at dusk. And all he remembers was, and he said, "My training saved my life." He said all he remembers was there was a flash in front of him, and what it was an 88 anti-tank gun converted from anti-aircraft gun, and just barreled right into his front tank. What it did is the shell went into the turret right where he was standing. And luckily, he said, my training was so good, I grabbed the side and jumped. He said, I was just automatically programmed to do that, and it saved my life because he jumped, and as he jumped, the driver had enough sense to keep it in drive, and he watched the tank explode in a fireball right as soon as it got away from him. And I'm trying to think I get this story straight. So what happened was he was really lucky. He was in a cornfield with stubbles, but 2 medics grabbed him, each an arm, and drug him across the cornfield. And he said there was a machine gun on either side from the hedgerow bushes, but they got him safely. He said he was in pain because his one leg was really hurt. It was by where the shell came into the tank, and he said he remembers getting his leg stuck on stubble, and it was really painful, and he remembers yelling out. So they got him to safety, and they got him to an ambulance, and really after that point, he was hospitalized for many months, but he's still alive, and he had a hip cast, and so they put him in the hip cast, and they decided it would be best to open it up to try to figure out what in the world they should do, whether they should amputate or what. And he said he still can remember when they opened it up, it was all full with maggots. And of course, which there's a positive thing because they're obviously, I don't know much about it, but he said once they got the cast off, there was a German surgeon that did one of the earliest skin grafts and it was a successful skin graft, but it took a long time to heal. He can remember that he was in the hospital for many, many months, even before he came back. But the surgery was successful. It saved his leg. They did not have to amputate it. But I can still remember as a kid or as a teenager, really, he still had some of the shell from the German artillery tank in his leg, and I could feel that as a kid, a very large piece. And when they took it out finally, like probably 20 years ago, the surgeon told him, he said, I can still smell that gunpowder when I took that out. But he recovered. They were able to remove that artillery shell, shrapnel, from his leg like 20 years ago. When he was like in his, 70s. So anyway, he finally gets out of the hospital. He's walking with a cast, walking with crutches is how he came out. And one of the things he remembers as he was leaving Europe, and I can't remember where this port was that he left. He said, I looked up and all I could see was these huge smokestacks, and he was on the Queen Mary. And he said, you can't imagine the troops on the Queen Mary. Of course, I don't have the numbers. My understanding was there's an enormous amount of troops that the Queen Mary could transport back and forth. And it moves so fast and zigzag that the U-boats were unable to hit it. It was historic. And I think he's right. I think he's right with that. I've heard that from other sources in military history. Well, he finally got back to the U.S. He's still laying in a hospital bed, and they put him in a hospital sort of taxi. And he said he'll never forget, the guy drove like he was crazy. He said he was screening around corners and everything to get him to the hospital or in the States, the Army hospital. But he remembers he laid in the hospital bed for so long and so many months, but he finally was able to walk with crutches. He had a big hip cast or something. Well, he really didn't have a whole lot to say after he got back in the States and got out of the hospital, other than there are pictures of him with his 70th Tank Battalion buddies with the cane and the crutches. And they had some wonderful reunions. I was lucky enough to attend a couple of those in the 60s. And one of the people in his battalion was a marshal, and he apparently carried Nixon's tapes. So, that's an interesting story. He sat at his table because I remember sitting with him, and he was a U.S. Marshal that transported Nixon's tapes around with. He said he explained he had him handcuffed to the briefcase, handcuffed to his wrist, and he was right in the middle of the Nixon tapes, transporting him around. But he just had wonderful people. I remember as a child, Cecil Nash, the fellow that wrote that book. When I was very young, Cecil Nash lost either one or both of his legs in the Hurtigan Forest. And Cecil said that what happened is his tank, he again was in a tank injury, jumped out of the tank and laid on the ground and tried to do the best job he could to play dead. Because the Germans came up and thought he was dead, and that probably saved his life. And they were able to bring Cecil back too. But I remember fishing when I was a little kid with Cecil Nash. He's a wonderful fellow. And anyway, his reunions were wonderful to go to. I mean, of course, they talked obviously a lot about the war and everything. Well, he met my mom in 46. My mom had communicated with him. She had met him because his sister was in a sorority back in the 30s. And the funny thing about my dad is she remembers he liked to ride horse bareback, and she remembers him riding around while the sorority was out there. She thought he was a show off, but she eventually wrote letters to him through his mother, my grandmother. And they finally got together, and there's this wonderful picture of her and my dad somewhere between 44 and 46, because they got married in 46. Her name was Mary Jane, and they got married in 46. But there's this wonderful picture of them at a restaurant with him in his uniform and all his medals. And when I was a kid, he showed me his Purple Heart, and let's see, he had the Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, and maybe I'm not remembering this or not, but he had a battlefield commendation. His promotion was to staff sergeant on a battlefield commendation, I think they call it. But he really shared just wonderful memories with me as a child, and I was very lucky. I can remember trying on his uniform. He kept it. I think he still got it. I tried it on when I was a little kid. I got such a charge out of just wearing it. So anyway, I think that's kind of a general. Hopefully that adds to your report, because
Yes, he was attached to the 4th Division on D-Day.
Okay.
And he was attached, if I remember correctly, as you said, to Patton in North Africa and Sicily.
Yes.
Did he ever talk to you about George Patton and the slapping incident?
No, he didn't. No, he made observations about it later after the war, but that's when maybe I would have brought it up. But he didn't remember anything about that, no, or have an opinion about it. He never talked about it. No.
Yeah. You said that I was told your dad spent 1 day shy of a year in the hospital, 364 days with his wound, his hip wound.
Yeah.
If that sounds familiar.
Yes, it does. Yeah. He spent a long time. He was in the service. I think he volunteered in early 42 and was in the service, served until he got injured in September of 44.
Right.
Then that was his active service. And then he spent a lot of time in hospitals. Yes.
You know, what's interesting about this interview, my father was in the 4th Division, 12th Regiment. And
Really?
Yes. And he fought in the Hurricane Forest and was frostbit and spent several months in the hospital in England. But what's further ironical is on December the 2nd of 1944, my dad's outfit was relieved by my grandson-in-law sitting here, his grandfather in the 33rd Division.
Oh, really?
333rd Regiment, 333rd Regiment, 83rd Ohio Division.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, on December the 2nd. So, and I've been to the Hurricane Forest 4 times. I would imagine that Cass, his tank was probably hit on the Call Trail.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Huh.
As he was probably trying to get over to Schmidt.
Oh, okay.
Those are battlefields there at the Hurricane. It was a terrible situation there in the Hurricane Force. We lost a lot of men. Did your dad have anything to say about the Hurricane?
No, other than relaying the story that Cecil laid after his tank got hit. He laid on the ground and played dead, so the Germans didn't bayonet him.
Right.
That was basically all he said about the Hurricane, other than the fighting was fierce. Cecil Nash had conveyed that to him, obviously. Yeah.
What kind of work did your father do when he came home from the service?
When he came home from the service, he went to work as a painter for my grandfather.
And
And
his last name was what?
my grandfather was Penn. It was my mother's father.
Right.
It was my mother's father, and he gave him a job as a painter.
And they had a shop somewhere in Mariemont, didn't they?
Yes, my grandfather and grandmother built a business called Penn's Paint Center. Yes, and he worked there from about 54 to 78, and they closed the business in 78.
And what did your dad do then?
He went in the insurance business.
What kind of insurance?
He sold life insurance, National Life of Vermont. He became an agent for them after he left the business.
Did he ever farm again?
No, but one of the things he did do is he went and saw his brother, his older brother, Arthur, lived in Sardinia. Arthur had a farm there, and I would go there when I was a kid, and particularly third grade was my favorite trip to the farm in Sardinia. And what they would do would be my grandfather, dad's father, my namesake Tom Parker. They would go and walk in the woods. My uncle, his son Ronnie, who has since passed away, but Ronnie, my grandfather, my uncle, and my dad would go in the woods, and I'd walk with them, and they'd go in the woods and tell stories. And I tried to gather as much as I could, but it was really wonderful comradeship that grew in the family from those kind of visits to the farm and walking around in the country together. So that was really a wonderful experience.
Did your mother work?
She worked at the store,
I see.
at the paint store. Yes, her father or mother's paint store. She worked there.
I didn't ask what church your father went to.
He went to Marymount Episcopal, kind of an interdenominational church, because my grandmother went to an Episcopal church in Cincinnati. They went to that church, and then various churches. They moved out of Marymount in '89 and moved to Indian Creek Apartments and lived there for many years. And I can't remember the church that she went to there, but I remember when I was a kid, they went to the Marymount, kind of an interdenominational church there. Well, when I grew up, that's where they were going.
The tank that your father came into the beachhead there at the Normandy invasion with the 4th Division, was that the ones that were propelled in water, the duck?
I think it was. I think it was a D&D double drive, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He didn't provide a lot of technical information about it, but my understanding was that they were training with the amphibious tanks.
Did he ever mention an Operation Tiger in England?
No.
Where
No.
They were training for D-Day?
No, I don't. He didn't have a name like that for it, but I have one more memory of England I have to share with you that I just remember.
Good.
When he was in England, he was still corresponding with my mother, long distance through my grandmother. And supposedly what the soldiers would do would be when they were off duty, they'd go into town and they would go into town to particular nightclubs. They go into town. And the story was that my mother even told me this story, was that they think that he was attracted to a female singer in town because she looked like my mother. So I had to add that. He'd walk all the way to town, maybe with his friends, without, but that was a story that she told me, that the singer in town in England reminded him of her. The other thing about England that was funny is he said the soldiers did not follow the British humor. They did not understand that dry British humor. They'd go to a movie and walk out like, what's so funny? I had to share that with you too.
Yeah. I'm glad that we had the chance to do this. How many children did your mom and dad have?
Just one, just me.
Just you.
Just
I
me.
see. I see. Well, I'm glad that we're able to do this, Tom. I hope it meets with your approval. And
oh, it does, absolutely.
There are very few. I've done almost 300 interviews myself, and we've done 500 total.
Jeez.
At the library, and we've never had anyone who was involved in such horrendous combat. North Africa, of course, wasn't as bad as Sicily, and Sicily wasn't as bad as D-Day. So your dad just kept getting in hotter water.
Yep.
The whole time. And
I agree. Yeah, totally agree with that observation. I've never thought about that, but the experienced troops, he always got the feeling that they were really put up front, and that makes perfect sense, obviously.
Yes. Yeah, and he was all the way to Caratan, and he was in St. Mary Glees. He went through the hedgerows.
Yep.
He was there for what they wanted to be the liberation of Paris in September of '44, so de Gaulle could march down the avenue there.
Yes.
And they had it safe enough by September the 24th.
Oh, okay.
44, and that's probably about the time that your father was hit.
Yes, it was September 44.
Yeah. Well, it's been a true pleasure to have met your father, and I'm going to make a copy of the entire roster of the 70th Tank Battalion.
So, thanks for doing that.
It's going to be attached to his interview, and in the future, somebody wants to do research, they can see all the enlisted men that were fighting for our country there. And so, do you have any questions, Aaron? Aaron's sitting here listening. We thank Aaron for Aaron Herm. His, as I told you, his grandfather was in the Hurricane Force, and that was the worst fight. That was worse than D-Day.
I bet. Yeah, I bet it was. Yep.
In some respects, it was worse than D-Day. I don't think anything was worse than Omaha Beach, but it was my dad called it the hurting forest, not the hurting.
I bet. Yeah.
But we want to thank you for allowing us to conduct this interview long term. It's our first Zoom interview, and we really appreciate it, Tom. And we'll get you a copy of everything as soon as I can get the library back open.
That's fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah, Ray, we just really, I thought it went very well. And me and my family really appreciate you doing this. We really do. It means so much to us. So many people are already asking me, my best friend was actually the person that referred you to me, was the best man at my wedding, Sid. And he somehow contacted the library and put it all together, and that's how it all started. And I'll be thankful for him for that. And he's looking forward to.
Well, just for the record, and I'll let this close the interview.
All right.
Your father joined the military on 12 February 1941.
All right.
He joined before the Pearl Harbor, so he was a volunteer before.
Oh, okay.
Your father was in the following campaigns: French Morocco, the Sicilian campaign, and the Normandy campaign, and the Northern France campaigns. Your father was awarded the Good Conduct Medal, the European African Medal, Middle Eastern Theater Ribbon with 4 stars, 4 Bronze Stars, the American Defense Service Medal, and the Purple Heart. And your father's official date of discharge was 31 August 1946. Robert T. Parker, Technical Sergeant, Armed Forces, unassigned, when he was discharged. And with that, Tom, we'll close the interview, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Ray and Aaron, thank you for your technical assistance. This worked very well. And you guys take care. And we really appreciate you doing this.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.